Right, good morning, Charlotte, again. Thank you for joining me, and welcome along to what's going to be the last, well, hopefully the last of what I've called the lockdown sessions. I haven't done one for a while actually because I've been busy with client work, which is good. And I think you were the first one, weren't you? And you're the first and the last, Charlotte. So Charlotte Braithwaite, just for anyone who doesn't know, psychotherapist and coach. I'm Tim Guest from Consulting 51, business management consultant. So Charlotte, what we're going to talk about today in sort of 15 minutes or so is kind of change management, but more the human side of it. Obviously humans and the human side of change management has always been very important. You know, if you haven't got the people on board, changes aren't going to be embedded. There's various process models that people follow for change. But you and I and everybody's well aware we've had a year of changes. We've had a year of uncertainty. We've had a year of unrest, work from home, back to the office, homeschooling, children back. We could go on. People are having to change. Clients of mine are running big IT change programs because we need to adapt to a new world. But what we really want to look at doing, what I'm asking you for some tips on, is how, when people are kind of fatigued and almost burnt out, how can we create that desire to want to change so that the changes that the employers are putting in are going to be followed through?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's one that extends beyond this sort of current crisis too, even if that's, business takeovers or infrastructures, or, whenever there is change, there is unrest. And I think especially right now, and for the past year, we have learned so much and witnessed and observed so much about the right and the wrong way to go about change. And I think one of the things that really stands out for me that I've been thinking about a lot, in the context of the current climate, but also with how businesses are having to adapt, is really about the fundamental acknowledgement of the basics. And I think, before we started recording this, you said, people don't like change at the best of times. So I think that's absolutely true. As human beings, we're not good with change.
Yep.
Even if it's kind of positive change, whenever we enter change, we enter an area of uncertainty and the unknown. And that, in our very primitive coding, creates a level of anxiety. We would much rather stay with what is uncomfortable but familiar than necessarily kind of risk for this sense of not knowing what to expect. And so when it comes to, I think, managing change, it's not about being able to predict the future or being able to promise things or kind of having a big vision, because I think we've all learned over this past year that promise of certain things that then aren't delivered, or having a vision doesn't actually help, especially when there's a level of sort of skepticism anyway. But that I think it's about really getting to grips with the fundamentals of what helps people to feel safe and secure, first and foremost, in their role.
Okay.
And then we build upon why, what this change is going to help with. Yeah,
I think we have to bear in mind as well, and it was a lady from the IOD in Jersey, actually, I heard make this comment on a recent webinar, that home working has been fantastic for some people. It's also been horrific for others, and it really depends what your home life is like. If you're one of these lucky people whose children are grown up or self-sufficient, or you have no children and you have a large office at home to work from, you might have really embellished the changes of work from home. A lot of people I know have really struggled with working from, one guy I know is sitting on his bed, literally waking up in the morning, having a shower, sitting back on his bed, getting his laptop and working like that. It really is very different for different people. So let's say we're trying to bring in some sort of new automated IT system into a company then. How can we sort of bring those groups of people together to try and bring that desire to want to engage and participate in the change, sort of taking into consideration different people's experiences of the home working?
No, it's and that's a really great point as well, about different people come from different angles and different experiences, and maybe with the example that you use of the IT system, some people may benefit more than others.
Yeah.
But I think the broader picture of what this is going to bring about, so what the changes are going to be and why are they needed. And I think it's the need for change that helps people to get on board. Because if they can't see the need, then it's just disruption.
Yeah.
It's just inconvenience.
Yeah.
We can't necessarily always sell them the vision of how much more amazing it's going to be, because people aren't naive.
No.
And quite often, even to get to the point where things are streamlined, there is disruption and there's, testing and chaos, and that comes with any kind of change. But the more, and I don't want us to use the word certainty, but the more kind of informed interpretation that we can give. So what is going to change? How is it going to change? How will you be impacted? Or if you're impacted, how will they be impacted? Yep. I think that sense of wider communication, it's not just your little cog, but it's the whole system, especially with something like your example of IT infrastructure that isn't just, one person's laptop. It's the whole network of what that then means. And it's not just for you, it's for the business.
Yeah.
And once we have a sense of how this might support the business, people naturally feel more secure in their place, their part, if this is going to help the business fundamentally be more sustainable or more secure. Because that primitive need of, I need to make sure I'm okay, is, if we don't have that, it's very difficult to kind of motivate or get to desire, which are the more sort of higher aspirational energies, if we're coming at but do I still have a job?
I think that's right, and certainly, what you're saying there is kind of what people would do in any kind of change program anyway. But it will almost be second nature because people are in the same office, or if they're not in the same office, you can at least bring people into workshops, presentations, and whereas now we're in this kind of remote video type, non-face-to-face world. And what we also can't forget is that people have had an awful lot of change forced upon them. I've had clients who rushed through putting in remote ways of working. They rushed through moving from old analog phone systems that they'd never bothered replacing, because the phone rings, I can make calls, I can receive them. Why would I want voice over IP phone through my computer system? And all of a sudden they now needed to do that. So normally speaking, these projects would take a while to do, but people rush them through in a week. And so I do think that employees will be naturally quite sceptical of any more changes that are coming into play. So I think it's just spending more time at the front end of the actual awareness as to why we need to change, why the business is doing it, and yes, you are safe.
Yes.
In terms of the workshop side of things, because I love running workshops, and you can get almost as much from employee workshops just by observing as you can by presenting in them. And then when people leave in the room, you sort of monitor their behaviour and what they're saying to each other. That's all gone if we're doing things in a remote world or partially remote world. But have you got any tips for how we can kind of how we can run these workshops better to get more from them if they are 100% remote or even 50-50 remote?
Yeah, and it's we're always going to suffer a limitation to working online. There are still limitations to working in person.
Yeah.
But this sense of, exactly like you say, the human behaviour observation, a lot of the time it's the offline conversations whilst making a cup of tea that we really get to hear individuals' kind of concerns, or the comments we overhear of someone's scepticism that we're then able to address when we're back in the room in the workshop. I think there's something about really setting the intention for online spaces, because like you said, we had to rush so much, and it was kind of like so long as you rock up, we've kind of made it, and then it's like the meeting started, but there's no, even when you're in the office, the commute to the meeting room is important. The fact that the door closes is important. It's all about setting this frame that ultimately helps to contain a space. And one of the things that I think is really important that gets missed in leadership so much of the time is, leadership sort of gets projected as like it's all about the vision and the mission and motivating, and it's all these sort of high aspirational qualities. But again, with what we spoke about, it's that if there's not the foundational safety, the containment, then it all just spills out. And actually, especially in crisis, we don't need more agency.
No.
Like we know we need to change because we're being forced to. We don't necessarily need, to motivate in a geeing up kind of way. Actually, we already have that because we're all full of anxiety and adrenaline. We already have that kind of, we want to do something about this to make it better. But actually, one of the things that I think is less advocated in leadership is being able to hold and contain. And that's all about the emotional management of spaces, especially online spaces. That gets, I think, a little bit missed.
Yep.
It's still quite new. But I know when we were talking before, it's, now we've been online for, over a year. And whereas in the beginning, maybe we all had our cameras on, or now it's kind of like we turn it off.
Yeah, standards have slipped, I've noticed, with people.
We're not as present because it's kind of become the normal-ish.
Yeah.
Or because ultimately we know that if our kids are arguing, we put ourselves on mute, turn the camera off, shout out the window, and then kind of come back. Or we're not as present as in a workshop where we couldn't just answer a phone in the middle and mute ourselves. In a face-to-face meeting, it wouldn't be like that. So I think when it comes to creating safe online spaces that help facilitate change management, forewarning and being very clear on the expectations and intentions for the meeting.
Okay.
So please, it's really important that we handle this consciously and that we're able to see you.
Yep.
You're important. We want to show up for you, and we want you to show up for yourselves in this.
That's a good way to frame it. So rather than we want to see you to check you're paying attention, it's we want to see you because you're important. We want you to play a part in it.
Absolutely. It's making someone feel validated of we actually care if your camera is off.
Yeah.
Not because we're trying to catch you out, but because we don't know if you're okay. We can't see your face. We can't. You wouldn't expect someone to sit in a meeting but just turn the chair the other way and
have headphones on.
Exactly. It's a mutual exchange whereby we know you're listening and I know you're listening, and that kind of, I think as well, giving people foreknotice so that it's not just in a meeting. If someone's got the camera off and say everybody needs to put the camera on, and that person hasn't given notice, we all feel a little bit self-conscious online. Maybe it's really messy behind us, or we didn't do our hair or something. But being able to say, look, this is the intent for the meeting next week. We would like everybody to have their cameras on, and this is why. We don't want people to be muted. We accept there's going to be disruption. It's okay if your kid walks in the middle. But this is why it's important, and this is what's going to help us feel safe. I think there is going to be the suffering of when the camera goes off and the meeting is ended, we don't necessarily have the kind of tea chats and things. Yep. But maybe even if it's a further facilitation of, there's going to be an open session that's separate to this meeting. So if you want to come on individually, some people, still feel conscious about speaking out in a group. I think having the option to be able to ask questions, or if you want to, email them, but being able to facilitate any form of communication that's still contained, rather than, does anybody have any questions at the end here?
I know, and people are very reluctant to put their hands up, aren't they?
Absolutely. I think allowing people time to formulate their own questions as well, especially if we're giving information that's new, that's going to impact people, it's quite likely that the immediate reaction is going to be all the defensive stuff, all the stuff that, how am I going to be impacted, and you sprung this upon me. But people need time to ruminate, process, and then be able to ask questions.
Yeah, the way I've seen that done well before, that I've worked on with a couple of my clients actually, is once we've sort of created that awareness and done those initial meetings with them, we've created a separate mailbox specifically for the project, and just said, if you've got any suggestions for how we can do this better, please email in. If you know of any risks that could impact the project, good or bad, email those in. Any concerns at all, just email them in, and then someone will address them. And then what they do as well, once a week, they run a drop-in workshop. surgery. That's the word I'm looking for. So it's an open Teams meeting. There's no one compulsory to attend, and they have key members from the project board are in there, and then people can just drop in, and the questions will be answered that have been emailed in. If they want to ask more questions one-to-one, they can. If not, then they can just listen, and it really does make people feel involved, which we found.
Yes, I think that involvement, and I like that term more than kind of getting people's buy-in.
Yeah.
It sounds a little bit more salesy, but people fundamentally want to feel involved. They want to feel that they're important.
Yeah.
And that especially as you said earlier, because so much of the change that we've gone through has been enforced. You know, we've not been able to email Boris Johnson with kind of our
like to have
views
tried.
personally. Yeah, and I think, you know, we all can kind of giggle because we know that's not realistic.
I'm sure he's had a few choice messages on Twitter.
I'm sure he has. But, you know, this sense of allowing people to have a voice, to feel acknowledged, because even if we're heard and the response isn't necessarily what we wanted, feeling heard is just a fundamental kind of emotional principle as a human being, that if we don't feel heard, you're going to get far more acting out, far more disruptive behaviour. You know, I was actually reading the other day in Brene Brown's Dare to Lead, that's sort of to the side of me here. She's on page 209, in fact. she has kind of the 10 most behavioural and cultural kind of issues that get in the way of what she terms to be brave leadership. And one of the things is when we don't address gossip or negative hearsay, when we don't deal with the feelings in the room, we then end up spending 10 times longer dealing with the difficult behaviours rather than just addressing people's feelings in the first place.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And again, if those people are having, I'm going off a bit of a tangent now, but I think it's still relevant. If those people are having those slightly negative feelings, then that's going to be on their mind rather than listening to what's actually happening. I mean, we've all been there. You get some email come in, you know, someone's crashed a car, the house has been broken into, your daughter's done this at school, and then that's on the mind rather than what's in front of you. And if you've got problems or anxiety over a change at work or something, if that's not addressed, then your subconscious brain is going to be taken over rather than paying attention to the good bits.
Absolutely, and I think that works the other way too. I know in our previous workshops that we've done, we've spoken about the 2-word check-in.
Oh yeah.
At the beginning of every meeting, just two words to describe where you're at.
Yeah.
And that, I think, also acknowledging how people are coming into a space as part of that contained and held space of, number one, emotion is welcome here.
Yep.
It may not be comfortable. We're not going to shy away from it.
Yeah.
Like, we can hold it, we can contain it, because if we don't, it ends up manifesting and fragmenting within the organisation. Yeah. And people become oppositional as opposed to collaborative.
Yeah. And I think it's become, we're almost done now, just got one more thing to say. I think it's become a lot more, not accepted, but people a lot more comfortable with discussing emotions. I did a webinar recently, and one of the other panelists was talking about well-being, corporate well-being. And you know, in years gone by, leaders may have paid a bit of lip service to corporate well-being, but we've now got leaders actually discussing their own vulnerabilities and their own feelings, because everyone's struggling at the moment, and that's one good thing that's come out of this pandemic, is I feel that people are more comfortable talking about their emotional side and how they're actually feeling. Is that what you found as well?
Yeah, I have. I think that there is just the sort of the paradox is, whilst we are more separate from each other, and we're having to work in this somewhat artificial capacity, there has been a far more, I don't know if it's like a humanisation of the workforce. We've seen into people's homes. We've met people's kids.
and pets as well.
Yeah, and that there is, all of a sudden, we exist outside of, you know, the suit or the corporate environment. And I think that has been actually really imperative and quite healing for people to see each other as more human, rather
totally
than
agree.
just a title or a role.
You're no longer Julie, just the finance director. You're Julie, the mother, the husband, the cat mother, and
exactly. And I think that humanization has allowed and opened the door into what is the most human aspect, emotion.
Yeah.
And I think that even this is why, you know, we spoke about the intention of even having a camera on, because we then become human.
Yeah.
We can see each other's faces. We are designed to be able to kind of read and interpret body language. It creates a hell of a lot of anxiety in us half the time. We're trying to figure out what somebody else is thinking or feeling with, but that's what we're attuned to do. So I think, you know, there's been many a dark gift out of this time. I think it's about finding gratitude within the collective grief that we've all struggled and suffered with, and that it's really what wisdom can we take from this? And I think there's an abundance of it if we really look for it.
Yeah, excellent. All right, well, that's excellent. Charlotte Braithwaite, psychotherapist and coach. Thank you very much for joining me again. Thank you.